Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Rublev routs Ruud in Bastad.
Qinwen Zheng captures her first tour title.
And Croatia are crowned Hopman Cup champions.
Chris, today is the 24th of July and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis here at Tennis Weekly HQ. We've had a week since Wimbledon, but time has not stood still for you because you've been out in Sweden at the Swedish Open, getting on the ground, getting lots of behind the scenes action from all the players there. So you haven't had a week off, have you? Joel is on a week off. But we are both here to catch up on the past week because we've had a load of tournaments going on, including a Hopman Cup in its kind of new form and new time of the year. But have you had any post-Wimbledon blues or have you been straight out onto those clay courts in Sweden?
Well, I'd kind of already moved on from Wimbledon because I was already in Sweden at the time, watching the final from the Bastad Hills. And I've been very busy, so I feel like maybe it will kick in now. Maybe I just was able to kind of tide over those post-Wimbledon blues by spending that week in Sweden. But no, it's been wonderful. I mean, back on the clay is a bit strange. I think we've all found that the adjustment. I mean, we've gone clay to grass to clay again for the players. So I think that's certainly a bit strange, but it's certainly a familiar sight having spent so much time on the clay prior to this.
Yes, and I have to say, that the Swedish hills, that sounds quite nice. It sounds quite
lovely. Went
idyllic.
Foraging, Kim.
You went foraging? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
A wild cherry, a wild raspberry, all sorts.
Oh, what a wholesome pursuit.
I know, and then popping down for some wholesome tennis at the Nordea Open.
Oh, that sounds absolutely lovely. It hasn't felt very summery here in the UK. We've had a lot of rain. But I'm hoping, then. No different to Wimbledon. Hoping to go out and maybe do some blackberry picking when the season commences. You're talking of foraging there. But what's been aside from being at the tennis in Sweden, what's been your highlight of this week? Because my eyes have been drawn to Mallorca, as always.
No, surely not, Kim.
I know. Roger Federer has been on holiday in Mallorca. He's been out at Santa Ponsa as well at the Mallorca Country Club, which is where they have the tennis tournament. And Venus Williams has also been on the island practicing at Rafa's Academy. So all these great tennis champions, Rafa aside, who's obviously there permanently at the moment, really, apart from jetting off and holidays and what have you. All these sort of greats have descended on Mallorca, which is all in the Mallorca kind of daily bulletin, like their newspaper. So they're obviously also quite excited to host them.
Is that 49 slams in Mallorca at one time?
Quite possibly, yeah.
It might be more than that. Oh, trying to figure that one out, but
it's too many to count.
Maybe that's something's going to happen there. There's going to be a big event, a big party. We're all going to get together. Or have they left the island? Do we know?
Well, I'm not too sure. I don't have my spies on the ground, but I thought it was exciting. Venus obviously practicing in advance of the hard court season, and there's top notch facilities at the Rafa Nadal Academy. So obviously a lot of players have trained there, including Casper Ruud, who you've spent quite a lot of your week watching, haven't you?
Yeah, and chatting to. I mean, he's been all around, and the nature of Bastad is that it's so small that wherever you go, you kind of bump into players, and you bump into him and his girlfriend, Maria, going to dinner, walking down the only high street really there is in the small town. But my highlight from this week, and we will be doing a separate episode on all of the goings-on from Bastad, and that will be slightly later in the week. We're speaking to Rublev in that episode, former world number 2 and tournament director Magnus Norman, and also Casper in that one. But my highlight for this episode is that the final was interrupted by a dog. And then as soon as this happened, I turned to the person I was sitting next to and I said, that's probably his dog, because Casper's dog, Bias, is very, very loud. It's a very, I'd say a yappy little dog, very sweet thing. But Casper then realised it was also probably his dog, and so he did announce that on court that he actually got interrupted by his own dog. And I thought that was just wonderful because it got quite a laugh from the crowd. But it is also a testament to just how noisy that dog was in a small town across the week. But I'd not seen that before.
Are they allowing dogs at the tennis then? Was it in his box?
Was it even in the stadium? I mean, we've seen, I think Bianca Andreescu's dog has made it onto the court. We've seen, I think, Venus and Serena have had their pooches at the sidelines before. But no, Bias was nowhere to be found. He was just very loudly barking on his walk. So I thought that was quite wonderful, given how just small town it is in Sweden there.
He knew his owner was playing and thought, right, let's annoy him.
Cheering support or maybe putting him off.
Oh, that's so sweet. Player pooches getting involved in the action. I love that. But yeah, Casper Ruud, he didn't have, the best of days in the final, did he, of the Swedish Open, because he was up against Rublev, so it was top two seeds in the final, but Andrey Rublev winning in straight sets, so 7-6, and then 6-love in that second set. Which was quite a surprise, like the nature of the scoreline in that second set. Obviously, you were there, Chris. What was the kind of main storyline of that match?
Yeah, it was a very, very tight first set. I think it was kind of a case that the early break did go to Rublev and then Casper was able to break back. It looked pretty even. I mean, that first set was as close as it can be. I mean, apart from if the tiebreak was pushed to be even closer. But it was just a case that after getting that first set under his belt, Rublev just accelerated away. The shots that were maybe slightly missing at times weren't missing in that second set. And Casper said on court that, I mean, he hit every single one of the bloody lines. And it felt like it was almost as though it was one of those days. He saw it like a football. And Casper was a little bit passive, if I'm being honest. Kind of throughout the tournament, he was perfectly sort of balanced in terms of defending, turning defense into attack. But I think he did kind of shy away from the ball a little bit. That allowed Rublev to step into the court, and then he was hitting winners for fun. And he said impressed that shots that, that he hadn't, that he hit with full force, he'd never expect to go in, and they did. So, I mean, it's one of those days when if your opponent's a top tenner playing, lights out tennis, you just got to hope to try and get on the board, and Casper wasn't able to in that set.
Yeah, and I mean, Rublev on a clay court, he's won all 4 of their meetings. So Ruud has never beaten Rublev on a clay court, actually, despite, Casper Ruud owning those like 250s out on the clay, as we know he loves to do. But, if he's up against Rublev, that's not the case. And Rublev, being Monte Carlo champion earlier this season, he's obviously had a good year on the surface and a good year generally, to be quite honest with you. He's doing really well in the race as well. So it was a good result for him. Ruud was previously a champion here. He'd won it 2 years ago. So obviously knows his way around the court, but just not at the level of Andrey Rublev on the day, with a very one-sided second set scoreline. But you asked Casper Ruud, didn't you, about Andrey Rublev? Let's hear what he had to say.
Casper, unlucky today, but was that the best that Andrei's played against you? And if he plays like that, do you think he's capable of making a slam final or even winning a slam?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he plays really aggressive, no doubt about it. And, we were quite joking a bit about back and forth on the court about certain things. But he said to me, it's just a matter of time before I hope you win or see you win your first Grand Slam. And I didn't have the chance to tell him back, but I'm sure that he will do better in quarterfinals in his career. I mean, it's just been a bit unfortunate in many quarterfinals. He lost many tough matches, and many times he played Novak also, who's always going to be probably the toughest player to play in the quarters of a Grand Slam. So it's been a bit unfortunate, but he's a really good player. I think when he plays on top, not many people can handle his pressure and his aggressive style, and he's one of the guys who plays fastest on tour in terms of how hard he hits the ball. So he also moves well, and today he was also did some good finesse shots with slice and certain things. So he had kind of all answers to my game today.
And I think something that was quite nice as well was when they talked about the fact that he has had 7 quarterfinals, and that came up as well after the match when they were doing their speeches on court. Whereas 7 quarterfinals, 3 finals, it didn't really feel like that. It felt like maybe the other way around. but they're very close, both of them, it would seem, to having a breakthrough. And as Casper said, when Rublev plays aggressively, he can do an awful lot of damage, and there's no question that he's got the game for it. The movement is the full package. It's just there's a lot of bad draws out there, and Novak Djokovic in the quarters of a slam isn't someone that I think anyone would really want to face, would they, Kim?
Yeah, I feel like both of these players are players that are waiting for the Carlos Alcarazes and the Novak Djokovic's to be absent from a draw, perhaps. And then it seems like one of these players that, would be prime contender for taking their first slam. We also asked Andrey Rublev as well about how he's been feeling and if this is the best he's felt on court so far this year.
You played a brilliant match, and your backhand down the line especially was on fire. In terms of your performance, was that the best you felt on court this year?
I would say the last couple of weeks I'm feeling the best for the moment so far. Since maybe, I don't know, Wimbledon.
Again, I was quite surprised with his answer, because I thought maybe he'd say absolutely, because a 6-love set against the world number 4, I mean, that probably means you're feeling pretty good out there. But he did say he was feeling good at Wimbledon. And I saw him play at Wimbledon, and his level was right back up where it was for the Monte Carlo Masters. So it feels like he's in a good place. He's heading to Hamburg, and you'd have to say he's the person to try and beat there, because he's going to be so high on confidence, as well as kind of winning in a place where, when you listen to our episode later in the week, it's very tricky conditions with the wind, and Rublev is obviously a ball striker, so it can be difficult, and he found a way to win and won in style, so a great result for him.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if maybe these two will face off against each other in Hamburg this week, and maybe Casper can get the better of him this time round.
That's what happens, Kim, in these ones. You go straight from Nordea Open to Hamburg, and then you play each other again. So I'll be in Hamburg this weekend, so I'm hoping for a rematch. I haven't seen the draw yet, though, but hopefully.
Hopefully he'll be keeping the dog at home, though, not bringing him to Hamburg, is Casper. But yeah, full episode on your time in Bastad later this week to be released. So listeners, definitely look out for that one. It's going to be a cracker with Chris out in the Nordea Open from last week. But let's have a look at the other tournaments from the past week. We had Gstaad as well in Switzerland, also an outdoor clay event. And well, we had quite a classic clay court final, I guess, between Pedro Cachin of Argentina and Albert Ramos Vinolas of Spain. Cachin getting his first ATP title. He won in 3 sets over Ramos Vinolas, coming from a set down. And yeah, I mean, I remember Pedro Cachin, he played Novak Djokovic, I think, in the first round of Wimbledon a couple of weeks ago. And here he is. Maybe he's used that experience, like playing, such a great of the game, to kind of power his way through to his first tour title. Maybe that experience has helped, because he, it was close in that last set, 7-5 in the third. He came through, and this was his first final as well. So really fantastic from Pedro Cachin, who at 28, is maybe getting up there a bit later in his career, but, obviously doing really well this season on the tour. But what did you make of the action now at the Swiss Open this week, Chris?
Well, I think it's been a great opportunity for someone like Pedro to get a win. I looked at some of the seedings there, and at the Nordea Open, there were 5 top 20 players, I believe, and there was actually no top 20 players at this 250 event. So it really did give a great chance for somebody to break through and get a great result. And as you say, like, he was pretty inspired against Djokovic at Wimbledon, and he's brought that level of form through. I mean, pushing him all the way in a tiebreak in the first round at Wimbledon, and he managed to get it done, which I think is so great. And it just shows you that the nature of the game now, we're talking this week about so many first-time champions, that there are these opportunities to get wins and get titles on the tour, especially at 250 level. So a great story, and another pooch, I believe, Kim.
Yes,
another one.
Another pooch, because Pedro Cachin brought his dog onto the court to celebrate. He's got a French bulldog called Tango, which I think is a great name, especially for an Argentinian player. And well, actually, apparently this dog was courtside, so he was allowed in. I'm not sure how that went down, but obviously helped propel Cachin to the victory, and he made sure that his dog was well rewarded with a nice cuddle afterwards. So I thought that was really nice. I mean, who else is going to bring their dog onto court, soon? It seems like it's the week for dogs. Also in Gstaad, we had Stan Wawrinka winning the doubles with, I think, Stricker, who's also a Swiss player. So they had a nice home victory there. And that was Stan's first doubles title in more than a decade, apparently. So he's, I still remember when I think of Stan and doubles, I still remember him and Federer winning. Was it in Beijing? And they did that funny celebration with the hands and like the fire or the fingertips.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I remember that. And it's so funny to think that he hasn't won a title on doubles. It makes you think, why was he playing doubles this week? I guess on home soil potentially, but it was the first time that he had kind of got a victory for Stricker. So it's definitely a nice one, because I think they were on the same team at the United Cup early in the year and forged a bit of a partnership. So you never know. You might see coming to a tournament near you, Stan the man on the doubles court.
Stan and Stricker, yeah, maybe they'll keep the partnership going, not just for the home tournament. Let's look at Newport as well, because this is, it's a slightly weird week on the tour after Wimbledon. We've got all these outdoor clay events in Europe, but we have a grass court event out in the States. It's a very historic one. It's Rhode Island, Tennis Hall of Fame. Newport is a great location, and this is a very historic, classic tournament. We had a nifty grass courter in the final with Adrian Mannarino, who I think might now be the French number one again. He's won the title anyway. He won it 6-2, 6-4 over Alex Michelsen, who I have to say I'd never heard of before this week. He's a really young, up-and-coming American teenager playing in his first final. But yeah, Mannarino got the job done. Straight sets in that final, becomes the French number one. Chris, who is he replacing though? Who's he now replacing as number one?
Well, so I believe maybe he was number one last week, but he just got it back from Humbert.
Okay.
They've been swapping it, and now he's firmly at the top at number 27 with his second 250 title of the year. So Mannarino's getting it done on the ATP Tour, whereas most of Humbert's results have come on the Challenger Tour. So I would say he should be far higher in our praise in that respect, because he is still winning titles. I mean, in his mid-30s. So that's brilliant. And it is a classic one where we're seeing so many more of these intergenerational battles. We saw a 20-year-old play a 36-year-old in the Wimbledon final, and now we're seeing a 35-year-old win against an 18-year-old who's almost unheard of. And I did have a little look at some of his results. I found a few interesting things out about him, because I thought maybe our listeners weren't too familiar with him, Kim. So he was actually tossing up as to whether he was going to be a swimmer or a tennis player, because his brother was a swimmer, and he said that swimming wasn't his thing. Swimming's very hard, and tennis is definitely more fun than swimming, because swimming is too tense.
Ooh.
And I thought it was quite surprising for us. I always feel quite relaxed after swim. I know that in Mallorca you enjoy a swim. I enjoy a swim in Mallorca. We feel very refreshed. So maybe competitive swimming, it's the most anxiety driving sport out there, whilst you wait for the gun at the start and diving in. But he's a tennis player, and he did very well this week.
Yes, he did. And I mean, maybe his swimming was slightly different to our sort of bobbing around in a pool swimming. But yeah, really, really fantastic for Michelsen. Just his second event on the tour. And, he only recently won a challenger title, I think earlier in Chicago this month. So to get through to a tour level final in only your second event is always a good, good news story, good start to playing on the tour. But yeah, experience just winning out really with Adrian Mannarino, and it's hard to keep up with the French number one, but yeah, fair play to Mannarino. He is the French number one. He actually beat Humbert in the semi-finals as well. So you just
a battle for the number one.
Rub
Who knew?
That in further. And I was thinking Isner was just going to win this tournament because it just has his name written all over it. But he got to the semis and lost to Michelsen. So yeah, fair play to Alex Michelsen there for doing so well and getting rid of John Isner from the draw.
Breaking John Isner, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he got one. Well, yeah, 7-6, 6-4 it was. So he didn't rely completely on tie breaks. But on the WTA tour, we also had couple of events. We had the Palermo Open, which Qinwen Zheng won to get her first title on the tour. So, yeah, another first-time tour titleist this week. Zheng beating Jasmine Paolini in 3 sets. Bit of a topsy-turvy scoreline, 6-4, 1-6, 6-1. Zheng is now the 11th Chinese woman to have won a WTA singles title. And yeah, she's been sort of, I guess, I've been noticing her more on the tour of late. You know, she's 26 at the start of this week, now won her first title. Quite surprising maybe that she hadn't yet won one, because she, has a really, really nifty game, doesn't she, Chris?
Yeah, and I actually thought that she might be one of those players that would break through at the French Open. She's obviously won this title on clay, and she had that fantastic win at the French against Simona Halep. And I think people thought with her big game, her aggressive front foot tennis, and her like really fantastic serve, that she probably would have pushed on a bit more by now, and she kind of hasn't got through kind of into having that major breakthrough, which I think is quite a big shame. But I think it is also the fact that she did get her ranking up high enough to play these big tournaments, so she doesn't really play that many 250s, and rather she seems to be going out quite often in, you know, the round of 16 or the second round of kind of the Masters tournaments, or the 1000s on the WTA Tour, as they're called. So I think it's just good that she's actually kind of getting herself some more match time, some more time on court, and getting that ranking even further up, because otherwise it does just feel like she hasn't quite gone as far as we might have thought at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, it comes in like increments. Sometimes you can have a breakthrough somewhere with a big win and, you know, not get the next kind of breakthrough until a bit later. But yeah, fantastic result for her. And Paolini, you know, on home soil as well, getting to the final. Not a bad week for her. And Joel's favourites, SST, falling in the semi-finals. And actually not get it, but not having, you know, throughout the course of the week, she didn't have any sort of drastically long matches or epic scorelines. So, you know, maybe surprising there.
She's changed her ways, Kim. She wants to get off the court quickly.
Yeah. We also had the ladies' event in Budapest, which I think actually has come under quite a bit of controversy this week for various reasons, which we'll get onto. But just a note on the winner, because another first-time winner here, who, again, a bit like Alex Michelsen, I'd not heard of before on the tour, and that's Maria Timofeeva. She's from Russia. She, you know, is, I think, down in the, well, she's now 129 in the rankings, having won the title, and that's brought her up, I think, over 100 spots. So she was down at, you know, 250 odd when she started this tournament. She was a lucky loser into the draw and went all the way to win the title, which is fantastic. I mean, you know, didn't have sort of the highest ranked players in this draw, but, you know, she got the job done, and to kind of, you know, debut here and win the title, fantastic effort, and bageling her opponent, Bindel, 6-love in the third set. So quite a comprehensive way to get the job done when it went into that third set in the final. Yeah,
and I think we can talk about the fact that obviously she was a lucky loser and then came through and won. But it's also, again, great to see that when lucky losers do get placed, that they do kind of have a great run in tournaments. We've seen it quite a lot this year, actually, that the nature of the game and just how competitive the tour is means that you might lose to one player in qualifiers who's really playing very well, and then the result is that you end up getting the lucky loser spot and winning the title. And we've seen lucky losers have some fantastic results this year. I mean, obviously, one of the standout ones was Struff in Madrid, who played that a qualifier lucky loser semi-final before he made the final there. So, yeah, I think it's great to see, and seeing this new talent come through and make the most of their chances, I think is wonderful. And it's such a big jump in the ranking. So she will be pushing into the qualifying for the US Open, and who knows what will happen for her in the US swing that she might not have even thought she'd be playing.
Yeah, it just goes to show that, you know, playing a 250 and winning it can drastically, you know, like halve your ranking if you're down at, 246 she was at the start of the week. She's also only the fourth player or the fourth lucky loser ever in history to win a title. So lucky losers tend to do pretty well, but they don't necessarily go all the way, as you can imagine. So just that's very impressive alone. And I guess, perhaps we'd be talking more about Timofeeva, but if it weren't for the other sort of, I guess, action from the week in Budapest, because we had a match, didn't we, Chris, between Zheng of China and Amarissa Toth, who's a local Hungarian wild card. Zheng actually retired at 6-5 down in the first set, but there was a bit of an argument essentially with the line judge about a decision, the umpire about a line judge's decision, and then some very unsavoury scenes. Could you just talk us through what happened? Because some of our listeners may not have been following this, because not everyone would have been following the Hungarian Open. It's safe to say, but yeah, so quite some unsavoury scenes and unsportsmanlike behaviour on court. Sad to say.
Yes, indeed, and very, very unfortunate incident. So what happened was we were at 6-5 in the opening set, and there was a shot that was hit by Zhang, and that very much looked like it hit the line. Whether it did or whether it didn't, I believe it was a bad call based on what I've seen and based on the mark that was rubbed out. But the key to this was that she questioned the call. The umpire did not change their mind. And before, at the end of the complaint from Zhang, Toth had come over and actually rubbed out the mark. And the crowd started to boo Zhang during this. And it seemed like the 20-year-old Toth was actually getting very much enthused by the crowd's negative reaction towards Zhang. And when Zhang did retire, after being very upset about what was happening, because it did feel completely unfair, and I fully understand why she would think that, because I've not seen a scene like this in tennis for a very long time. Toth was then celebrating the retirement of someone who was obviously distraught at what had happened in her treatment, for someone who is very well liked on tour. And there was a massive outpouring of support across Twitter from players like Onshabu, Caroline Garcia. It was across the board that this was not the right way to behave, and that Zhang was a wonderful person, a great person to be around on tour. And if you're the Hungarian Open, I think you have to really look about what principles and values you're promoting at that tournament, because it definitely will not be the top of most players' lists to return to.
No, and the way that they came out on social media afterwards with the actual official tournament account, that did not help matters, did it?
It didn't. They were posting in Reddit forums saying, this was not racism, the judgment was fine, and that Toth had nothing to apologise for. And you just feel like it's just a case where you don't really know what goes on. But I mean, yes, she is a Hungarian wildcard. Yes, she is 20. But if we're looking at kind of bad behaviour on the tour, this is far exceeds anything that, a Holger Rune has done at 20 or anything like that. I think, and this was her debut match on the tour. And so I understand the tournament want to be protective of her to a certain extent, but her behaviour was inexcusable, and the tournament's defence of it and saying this wasn't racism, I think is also not acceptable, because they have clearly not done an investigation. Nothing has been looked at yet. This is them trying to cover their behinds when it comes to this and get this to blow over. But there has been an apology since from Toth, who says that she is very sorry for how this went down and she never thought this would be the way she'd get her first WTA win. So she has apologised, but for many, I think it will be too little too late.
Yeah, not nice to hear all and see that. And I mean, I guess a positive you could draw from it is that we don't see this sort of behaviour very often. And so when it does happen, it's such a shock, which means that for the most part, the majority of players are very sporting and fair. And so, it's this is like it causes a big outcry because it's an anomaly at the sort of higher levels of the sport. So that's a positive I'm taking from it at the very least. And I'm sure Toth will have learnt her lesson. And she did actually get knocked out by Katarina Bindel, afterwards, who was the eventual finalist. So just before we go to the break, Chris, we've got one more event that took place last week, and that's the Hopman Cup. So in addition to all of the ATP and WTA events, the 250s that we've kind of just touched upon, Hopman Cup, post-Wimbledon, July, Hopman Cup is back. It's out in Nice, so it's not down under before the Australian Open. It's a very different sort of vibe and time of the year. Croatia won with a team of Donna, Vekic and Borna, Coric. So, yeah, a very decent team, especially, Vekic in recent good form. Carlos Alcaraz was there, Wimbledon champion. Fair play to him. He showed up and he played for Spain along with Rebecca Masarova. Croatia won, beating Switzerland in the final. What did you make overall, of the event? Like, aside from Croatia winning, which is obviously fantastic for them, I think it's only their second title in the event. Were you really, focused on the Hopman Cup at all? I know you were out in Sweden, but I have to say, me being back in the UK, I had all the tennis at my fingertips, but the Hopman Cup was not really drawing me in like it normally would, in its old format.
Yeah, I think also the format of being a warm-up event for the Australian Open, we're very excited to see those players play for the first time that year. The mixed format was something to really look forward to at the start, to kind of get people warmed up, ready to play the season, whereas I feel like straight after Wimbledon, it's almost a bit of a weird sort of cash grab for some of the players. I'm not saying that any of them necessarily need it, but I do know that some players were scheduled to play elsewhere before this was announced, and then they shifted because they were going to be given a bit more money to play here. So it felt a bit like players were paid to turn up, but not necessarily paid to play, because Holger Rune couldn't get the ball in the court. I mean, he lost everything in straight sets, and it felt like some players were really playing and competing hard, and some weren't. And I think for a Hopman Cup, it's always about the spirit of competing and having an enjoyable time, but still make sure that this is a competitive thing. There is a lot of kind of, the Hopman Cup is something that there's a great esteem attached to it. It's a great title to win. So it's a bit of a non-event this time, and I do wish that they would put it back in Australia, in its former home, and have it as a warm-up event, because this felt a bit more showboating in Nice than it did competitive mixed doubles.
Yeah, it didn't feel like everyone was fully at the races. And I kind of feel if you're going to play a tournament, then, make sure you're fully present. But I think just the timing of it, and it's just, maybe I don't know if they're going to reflect upon this and think, did it work? Was it successful? Should we do it again, at this time of the year? But I have to say, I just don't think it got the sort of gravitas that it used to have. Like you said, normally it's all eyes on the players because it's the start of the year, pre-Grand Slam, and this is very much, it was just a bit of an afterthought, really. But Switzerland, I have to say, they did very well, considering they had Celine Naif and Leandro Riedi, both players who are, much lower ranked than their opposition, really. And to get to the final, beating France and Denmark, pretty decent from them. And Switzerland, have a very good record in this tournament, having won, I think, the last two editions back when it was played previously. But Vekic and Coric getting the job done for Croatia. But just, I think there'll be question marks over whether we have this Hopman Cup at this stage of the year going forwards, or whether there's just as much of an appetite in that post-Wimbledon kind of lull that we get. But let's take a quick break now. We'll be back in the second half to discuss Daria Kasatkina questioning the WTA rules regarding top 10 players' participation, looking at whether there should be a best of 5 sets for women at the Grand Slams, and also looking ahead to all of this week's action, including the return of Iga Świątek in Warsaw. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. Now we're going to move on to a bit of par for the courts action. It's been a while, Chris. We've done a lot of Wimbledon focused coverage of the last few weeks, which meant we haven't done our usual kind of quiz segment. So I'm personally pretty pleased that it's back. Hopefully our listeners will be pleased as well. And I've got one for you, Chris.
Right. I've enjoyed the break, Kim. I've got to be honest, not being put in the hot seat. But I do think I need to get some credibility back after my predictions.
Yes, after your Coco Gauff winning Wimbledon prediction, I think
Don't remind me.
You can redeem yourself.
Redemption arc needed.
From the Slam Spoon of Shame. Will it be a par for the court Spoon of Shame? I'm going Hopman Cup themed for this one. We've just been talking about it before the break. And I've got... hopefully quite an interesting Hopman Cup themed par for the courts for you. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so 2019 was the last edition of the Hopman Cup. And obviously it's returned last week, but it's been 4 and a bit years since we've seen the Hopman Cup out and about on the tour. So there were 16 players involved in that Hopman Cup. So 8 teams of 2 players. So 8 men, 8 women,
Yes.
16 in total. Can you tell me how many of those players can you name? That's the challenge for you.
Oh, this must be the hardest one we've ever had.
I can give you the countries, but I want to know the players. So, I mean, unless you want to make it even harder.
Where will par be set for this one?
Par will be set, I think, at 50%. I'm going to be slightly kind to you. 50%,
Okay.
So 8 players that played in the 2019 Hopman Cup. And I can give you the
feeling
countries.
slightly confident. I will need the countries, but I can guess some of them. I remember some of them,
Yeah.
I think. But
Okay. So do you want the countries first of all?
I mean, obviously, especially
Okay.
and for our listeners as well, please, not just for me.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's not all about you, Chris.
Not
Right,
this
so the
time.
countries, Hopman Cup 2019, Germany, Switzerland, France, United States, Greece, Australia, Spain, and Great Britain. So if you need reminding as you
Okay.
go along, let me know.
Okay.
But
Okay. Wow.
so I need 8 players from those 8 countries.
I'm going to say I'm quietly
It's the
confident
powerful
on this
thoughts.
one because I think the reason why you didn't say who won it for Switzerland was because maybe you were going to ask this. So I do know that the winners were Bencic and Federer for Switzerland.
Correct. Both Bencic and Federer did compete in the 2019 Fed Cup. Fed Cup? The Hopman
Fed
Cup,
Cup,
sorry.
I mean, I'm not sure he'd be allowed.
I'm thinking Federer and then Fed, so sorry, my mind.
Yeah, I mean, for the last 2 editions of it basically was the Fed Cup. But in terms of a match that I remember that caused a lot of media attention was Serena Williams played against Roger Federer there with her partner, Frances Tiafoe.
Yep, Serena Williams, Frances Tiafoe. Again, 2 correct answers. Well done.
I also remember the final. I think that was Zverev and Angie Kerber in that final. I think I watched that for Germany.
You are correct. It was Zverev and Kerber. Well done. So
And
you've got
then-
6 so far, correct?
I also remember a particularly awkward interview on the Get to Know Each Other, which was Katie Boulter and Cam Norrie, who clearly did not know each other very well at that point, for Great Britain.
Yes, you are correct. So Katie Boulter and Cam Norrie for Britain. So, well, that's 8. You've reached par for the courts.
I'm
Congratulations.
not sure how many more I can get, though, but I think there's one more partnership that I can get, or I can at least guess. And I think the Greeks were there. I think we had Maria Sakkari and Stefanos Tsitsipas partnering up.
You are correct. Yeah, I do you know, in hindsight, I should have made par for the courts a lot higher.
No, but now I'm a bit stuck as to who I'd go for. So what countries did I have, Kim?
So you've nailed Germany, Switzerland, United States, Greece, and Great Britain. We've still got France, and we've still got Australia and Spain. So if you can name those players, I'd be very impressed.
I think I can name a couple of players, but I can't name the teams. I think I've got 2 more names. I think Elise Cornet, I think, played there. I think I remember watching that. And I do think that Ash Barty was there. But I'm not sure, though.
Correct to both. Elise Cornet for France, Ash Barty for Australia.
And
do you
then
know
I
who
should
they're-
guess. I should guess, right?
Yeah, have a wild guess.
I'd go Richard Gasquet and for the Australia, who would it be? I don't think it was a Bernard Tomic or a Kyrgios. That would have made a lot of headlines. What about Alex de Minaur? Was he there?
It wasn't Alex de Minaur, and it's not Richard Gasquet either.
No. Who was it?
So I would never have guessed this player either. Australia is Matthew Ebden.
Really?
who
Matthew
was
Ebden?
ranked 48 in the world at the time. And for France, a player that is not currently so highly ranked, but Lucas Pouille, who was ranked 19.
I wouldn't have got that one.
So, yeah, I think those two are much harder to get. You've got one team left, the Spanish team. Can you make a guess as to who might have
year
been
is
involved?
2019. I'm going to go for Batista Agut, and what about Muguruza?
Muguruza is correct. Well done. And it wasn't Bautista Agut, it was David Ferrer who was still
In
playing at that
2019,
time.
he was still playing.
He was ranked down at 147 at the time, so I feel like that might have been his last, certainly his last Hopman Cup, but yeah, on the way out. But well done, Chris. You did very well. You succeeded and beat my par score of 50%. So well done. So yeah, we had Kerber, Zverev, Bencic, Federer, Cornet, Pouille, Serena Williams, Tiafoe, Sakari, Tsitsipas, Barty, Ebden, Muguruza, Ferrer, and Balta, Norrie. And as we mentioned, Switzerland won that with the pairing of Bencic and Federer. So obviously, yeah, top-notch pairing there. But yeah, fantastic. Well done, Chris.
Thank you so much, Kim. Finally, I'm back in the winner's circle.
Yeah, you've redeemed yourself well and truly there. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed Path of the Courts being back. We've also got our mailbag segment back, and we had a lovely question during Wimbledon from Saif on Twitter, who said, as it's major time, here's a question for the team. What do you all think about women playing best of 5 sets at majors? Also, if that was the format, which major winner do you think wouldn't have won her title or titles, and which player without a major would have won at least one? So thank you, Saif. Thank you so much for your question. Really, that's quite a tricky one to think about who would and wouldn't have maybe won titles over best of 5. But first of all, Chris, do you think that women should be playing best of 5 at Grand Slams?
Well, I think it's a tricky one because it's not necessarily what we're used to. I think there might eventually be a move for men to play best of 3 is more where it's going rather than women best of 5 due to the TV nature of the sport. I think there might be eventually some changes in that respect, like there has been across all of the tours. That used to be the case that Masters 1000 for men were also 5 sets in the finals, but they weren't for the rest of the tournament. And then before that, obviously, there was a precedent of playing 5 sets more commonly. So I think for me, I don't really think that often about the difference in the number of sets that are played. I think a lot of it does come down to tradition and the fact that the nature of the game and the physicality of the game is that bit different. In terms of who would and wouldn't, that's a good one. We're looking for, I think Caroline Wozniacki would have won more slams. She's a marathon runner. She can go for days on a tennis court. So I think maybe she would have had some more slams in the sense that if every match was 5 sets, I think she would have gotten to a lot more finals because she would have outlasted a lot of her opponents. And I do think that for some players who might struggle with their kind of being their form or always being in top shape, maybe someone like Rybakina wouldn't necessarily always wouldn't have won that Wimbledon because she has kind of been quite injury prone. So I do think it would lend itself a bit to the players who are less frequently injured would be doing the best, and the players like, Kvitova, she's done very well in terms of getting through matches. But if it was 5 sets, maybe she would make some unforced errors in there, and go off the boil for a bit. So it's a mix of concentration and physicality that I would say. But I think Serena might also have won more as well, because she's got a bit tight at times. And if she had an extra set to play with, I think who knows how many more she would have won. But for me, I'm not necessarily seeing it as would I like to see women? I would like to see women play more tennis, full stop. But I'm not sure the best way to do that would be 5 sets.
Yeah, I think there's other ways of maybe boosting the profile of women's sports and
scheduling.
And there's other factors, isn't there, with prize money and scheduling to sort of put them more on a par. But I'm not against 5 sets for female players. But I think it's not been done before, and that's not to say they can't do it. But I think, and I'm not like a big traditionalist, just because something's always been done a certain way, it has to remain like that. I just don't know if it's fully the answer. However, I also agree with you, Chris, on Serena. I think she would have won more because I think, if someone's going to play lights out against like Serena,
For
having
5
to win
hours.
that extra, having to win that extra set, we know when we see this in the men's game, it's so much harder to get it done over 5 sets. So I think she would have won a lot more. And yeah, I think players like on the vein of a Wozniacki, that sort of longevity and real top fitness, and having that game that doesn't easily like break down, very consistent, rather than the sort of more flashy players, I think probably would benefit.
Maybe Sharapova, would she have won less potentially? I don't know. She does have a great sort of resilience on the court, but you can't play at her level of intensity for 5 sets. I don't necessarily think at the same level. I think we'd see lots more dips in levels with players. Don't you think? Like maybe slightly less high quality finals at times.
I don't think making it something longer is necessarily making it better. And I think also if you're going to be a great of the game and win your slams, you'd think that the same players would almost elevate themselves to play over 5 rather than 3, and they'd still win regardless if they're that sort of so minded. So it's a really interesting, what if question, and maybe one day we'll see best of 5. I don't know. Perhaps
We've got to say for Joel that Sartori Tormo or maybe Haddad Maya for 5 sets. Surely you'd think that they'd be in the mix for winning that one major.
Oh, SST would. I mean, she's probably in her head already playing 5 sets. So that's why she
knows
wants
she's playing a 5-set length of match when she steps on
3
court.
hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one rule that is currently in place on the WTA Tour is the fact that only one top 10 player can currently play in a WTA 250 tournament, like per tournament. And this past week, Daria Kasatkina has spoken out on her girlfriend's YouTube channel about how ridiculous she thinks this rule is. And this kind of comes about, she was playing in the Palermo event. I think she got to the quarterfinals. But she said there's such strict rules about how many WTA 250 tournaments that top 10 players can play, and also how many can play in each tournament. And she's just sort of saying, how can these tournaments make money when there's only sort of one top 10er allowed to play? They're just restricting it for a lot of the top stars, and it doesn't seem to be helping either the players or the tournaments. But what's your thoughts on this? Because obviously it's really good that Kasatkina has spoken out about this. We probably need more players to do so if they're not happy with the rules, and it makes life difficult for them. But what was your stance on kind of her calling this rule out?
Well, I mean, I've just come from watching 2 top 10 players playing the final of a 250 over in Boston. So, that just feels like it doesn't make sense, the difference between the ATP and the WTA in this area. It does seem like a bit of an odd rule, because then you're guaranteeing that you won't have 2 top 10 players in a final. And it also makes it very difficult in order to attract people to come and watch this. And that's Kasatkina's big point, that how do 250s make money and how do they thrive if you're going to have one top 10 player allowed? And there's a big difference between having, an Iga that we'll see in Warsaw, the number 1 in the world, and then having, a Kasatkina who would have been ranked in the top 10, was ranked number 11. So there were no top 10 players here. That is different star power. So it is very odd that the tournament's going to only invite one top 10 player. I think in terms of what the WTA is doing generally, I think there has to be a strategy they have to try and focus players to play the bigger events and to try and get those events to have more prize money, because they're even talking about banning top 30 players from 250 events full stop, not just kind of having 2 top 10 players. So for me, it speaks more to the fact that they don't want these 250 tournaments to be as popular and as successful and to have the money. I think they do want to try and focus the attention on less tournaments, and bigger tournaments seems to be the plan, whether that's bigger draws or bigger prize money. But I'd say they're kind of failing at both ends here, because Rome had a fraction of the prize money that the ATP event had. And when you look at the WTA 250s of this week versus the 250 that I attended at the Nordea Open, I mean, they're poles apart in prize money, in popularity, in attendance. And so it feels like they're shooting themselves in the foot here. And I completely empathise with Kasatkina, because we want to see more people and more top women's tennis players playing. And this literally prohibits them from doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think having such a different rule between the WTA and ATP, that just does not help matters. It does not help put them on an equal footing. And I also think from a tournament perspective, the admin must be really difficult. You're fielding all these applications and then, I don't know, just dealing with it from like that sort of administrative angle. I think that would like irritate me if I was working in the tournament. But I think it's raised some interesting questions, and I don't know if it will change based on feedback. All can encourage is for the players to feedback if they're not happy with it. But yeah, really interesting point raised by Kazatkina. We do have some more of these 250s coming up this week. So
we're checking, Kim, is there only one top 10 player?
Exactly. What's your ranking and should you be there? We've got on the ATP side, we've got Umag, which is a 250, and also Atlanta. And we've got Warsaw for the WTA and Lausanne as well. And we've also got Hamburg for the men, but that's actually a 500. Where are you looking forward to the most this week? I know we mentioned Hamburg. We've got both Ruud and Rublev. They could very well be meeting again in another final. I see that Jan Choinski, a British guy, he's qualified as well for the main draw, which is exciting. Pedro Cachin is there. Maybe he'll continue his form on the clay as well. And Zverev also in attendance. Do you think we're going to be seeing a Casper Andrey Rublev battle again?
Wow, I mean, that would be great, wouldn't it? I will actually be heading to Hamburg for the semi-finals of the men and the finals for the women on the Saturday. So if you're there, do let us know and we'll come and say hello. But I mean, Casper's got a very tricky first round versus Baez. I mean, he's a very good clay courter who has actually reached the final at the Nordea Open, and he's obviously won titles before. I think he's won a title on clay this year. So he's coming back to form, and you have to think that there could be some really tricky matches in here for whoever comes through at the Hamburg Open, because you've got a Zverev versus Casper potential semi-final, as well as a Musetti Rublev one. So similar lineup, obviously, but that would be very interesting to see. But my attention, apart from my attendance, will be in Warsaw, because I have some top secret information that they've swapped this from clay to hard because Iga wanted better preparation for the US swing. Her father is the tournament director, and so it's the same surface they have as the US Open. So this is how you get Iga to play your tournament. You get Mr. Swiatek to set it up, and then you get to put it on her preferred surface. So that is star power. And it'll be interesting to see going from clay last year, where she lost her unbeaten run on clay to Caroline Garcia, to a hard court where we'll see what sort of form she's in heading into the US Open.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one way of changing, changing the surface. But you would do anything, wouldn't you, for your star player? So I think that's pretty cool.
You're only top 10 player allowed.
Well, yeah, exactly. And obviously you're going to say yes.
Her, Kim.
Yeah, I wonder if they had a hard decision. Which top tenner should we allow at the Warsaw Open?
Warsaw Open.
And also in Umag, we've got Marin Cilic, who is back and playing in his home event. So that's exciting. And in Atlanta, that's headlined by obviously Taylor Fritz and Alex de Minaur. So loads of American players in that one, as you can imagine.
And Nishikori's back. That's great to see, back at tour level. So that would be fantastic to see him play against some of the top players, and potential match up with Ben Shelton if he gets past Jordan Thompson. So a great to see him back, because we know he's so good on a hard court as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be back as well, I think, next week to catch up on all of the events. But we will also be releasing a Borstol special later this week.
Yes, indeed.
So, Chris, you'll be kind of presenting that one and sharing all of the wonderful insight that you've gained from being out and about in at the Nordea Open last week. So
it's called Foraging with Chris, is that episode
Foraging
title?
with Chris, yeah. Wild raspberries, dogs, and Casper Ruud.
Yeah, it's very wholesome.
Yes. Well, it sounded like you had a lovely week there. So it's great that you're going to be in Hamburg. So fantastic. Doing lots of traveling at the moment. I envy you greatly.
It's the summer, Kim.
Yeah, well, you've got to make the most of it. But listeners, I do hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Do remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all of the action from the ATP and WTA Tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. And we're at Tennis Weekly Pod at all of those. And we'll be posting the clips from our interviews in press with Rublev and Ruud, as well as tournament director, former world number 2 and French Open finalist Magnus Norman. And you can also email the show. It's tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. Or you can check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we'll be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our next tour catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We will see you again soon.